So we are now connected.
Yes.
So good afternoon to all PPP professionals joining us today for this session on financial of rail PPP projects. My name is Doris Chevalier, and I have been an engineer and an expert in project financing for the past 35 years, and particularly in the railway sector. I have participated in more than 20 billion euros of projects in the world, and I work for the Ministry of Finance in France for the PPP task force. I've been working also for large companies like Alstom, Bouygues, Vinci, and for financiers, which give me a quite complete vision of PPP financing. Today, I am an independent expert consultant. I have funded InfraBoost, which is my own company, and I put all my efforts towards impact finance and the circular economy. Please let me introduce to our speakers. Ladies first, we have Mrs. Martha Lawrence, who is co-lead of the Global Solution Group on Transport Connectivity and Regional Integration and leader of Railway Solutions at the World Bank. She is currently involved in the bank's technical assistance and lending programs in India and Africa. Martha has over 30 years of experience in the railway sector with extensive knowledge in railway restructuring, railway finance, and transport regulation. She led the development of the World Bank resources on railway reform, which was called Railway Reform, a toolkit for improving rail sector performance. And she has recently published reports on China's high-speed rail development and modern railway services in Africa, which are building traffic, building value. Mrs. Lawrence has a BA in economics from Northern University and an MBA in finance and transportation management from Northwestern University. Thank you for being there, Martha. Elan Kushaba, who will be joining us very shortly, is the Global Director of CPCS P3 Transaction Practice. He's an accomplished infrastructure finance advisor with over 20 years experience in originating, structuring, and leading complex infrastructure transactions through the project lifecycle in Asia, Africa, the Middle East, Canada, and the UK. More recently, he has worked at the World Bank Group, leading IFC's PPPs advisory team for Western and Central Africa. He has a very strong track record of leadership and execution in advising public and private clients in the development, the procurement, and the financing phases of infrastructure projects across the power, transport, health, and water sectors. Elan's experience includes a broad range of rail transactions, including extensive experience acting as lead advisor on most of the rail concessioning mandates in Africa in the 1990s and 2000s, and subsequently on rail deals in the Middle East, UK, CIS, and also Canada. Thank you, Elan, for being with us. I'm turning now to Arka Sinha. Arka is a law graduate from Delhi University. He served at various senior positions with government of India for 38 years, from 1974 to 2012, as a member finance on the board of directors of two biggest SPVs created by Indian Railway. They are Konkan Railway Corporation and Dedicated Freight Corridor Corporation, two very main concessions. Amongst many other assignments, he was mainly associated with the execution of three major projects undertaken by railways in this period. That was the construction of Konkan Railway, Ahmedabad-Jaipur Gauge Conversion Project, and the construction of dedicated freight corridors through the FCCIL. Now, he is a freelance consultant, and we are very happy to welcome him today. Last but not least, we have with us Dr. Naresh Bana. He's a peer-recognized international consultant. Dr. Bana founded BBV Consultant LLP in 2011, since advising on PPP for infrastructure in India and overseas. He's a steering committee member of the World Association of PPP Unit, welcoming us today, and a chairperson of its South Asia chapter. Dr. Bana is Vice Chairman of Indro-Sri Lanka Chamber of Commerce and Industry. He is a regular contributor to the Unity policy planning effort. He's inter alia leading the railway project team. This is where we met, namely. His team has the credit of construction of Greenfield railway project in terrorism-affected Jammu and Kashmir province in India. As a distinguished civil engineer, he was awarded PhD for his work analyzing suitability of Swiss challenge approach, along with PPP for expediting rural project delivery in Indian context. So now that I have presented our panelists, my first question will be for all of you, and we will start with ladies first. The first question is about transit-oriented development, we call TOD. And Martha, will turn to you. How TOD is key to sustainable transportation needs? The floor is yours, Martha.
Thank you very much. Well, we all know that railways have assets that have value beyond their use in the railway and can be monetized to support the funding of rail services without impairing the usefulness of the asset to the railway. And passenger stations are a prime example of this. Developing retail, dining, and leisure facilities within the railway station enhances the station's comfort and value to the customer, making rail traffic more attractive, and at the same time, bringing rental income to the railway. And TOD just takes that notion a step farther by roping in the land around the station that typically does not belong to the railway, but benefits by having the railway provide service. When it's done well, it involves a close collaboration between the local authorities who control land use and zoning around the station and the railway to provide a higher density of land use and good access to the railway station. This, in turn, creates a more compact and walkable community and increases the number of potential passengers to use the railway. And it creates higher real estate value, which the local taxing authority can use in part to support provision of the railway services. So you can see that there's a potential win-win for local government and for the railway. The challenge always is to bring together these very different organizations to think in a long-term way to structure a deal that works for all the parties and these two and numerous other stakeholders and shares the benefits among the parties in a way that everybody wins. But when it happens, the beauty of the TOD approach is that it's more than a one-off source of funding. The real estate benefits created by TOD last into the future and so can provide a sustainable and predictable funding stream for the railway and for the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martha. Now I will turn to Mr. Arka Sinha. In your views, how does TOD is key to sustainable transportation needs?
What Martha has said is very true, but I think it cannot be really applied to urban spaces as a uniform rule. It depends upon the urban environment around the railway station or the transport station around which the TOD is being planned. As far as a new urban development is concerned, things are easy. When you are planning to begin with, then TOD offers a very good tool of enhancing value for everyone concerned, as Martha said, not just for the transportation authorities, but for the community around it by providing for increased space productivity, by providing for better environment and adding values. But in countries like India, for example, where there are lots of legacy issues and the urban space is already so congested, and there are so many difficulties in rearranging the spaces or the buildings or the facilities, that TOD in existing circumstances is of a very limited value. We have tried it in India. Station development, like for example, I will just point out that about 5 years ago, the government of India created an SPV called the Indian Railway Station Development Corporation to kind of develop stations and areas around stations on the principles of TOD to generate value for both railways and for surrounding areas. But after trying for 5 years, they could develop only one station, that is Habibnagar in Bhopal. And after that, the government has disbanded the corporation because it was not getting anywhere. Now, station development has become an in-house activity for Indian Railways, and they are on a piecemeal basis selecting those places where they find that there is still some value to be added because spaces can be manipulated. One such place is Surat in Gujarat, and 2 or 3 other stations are being tried out. But at least the experience of Indian Railways has been that TOD has not been really providing value in existing congested areas where legacy issues are there, and manipulating space around or buildings around is a bit difficult. So to my mind, TOD has a limited role in an urban area which has been developed in cities which are maybe 500 years old and which cannot be easily reorganized. But yes, I agree with Martha that in a new planning, in a new urban area which is coming up, TOD can really provide for sustainable transport development. Thank you.
Thank you, Aka. I'm turning now to Mr. Kushaba. What are your views on this topic?
Well, it's hard to follow my fellow speakers and provide new insights, but I'll do my best. In the projects we're working on, largely in Africa, in Asia, and parts of Europe, TOD is for us in the work that we do a core requirement for cities trying to achieve a modal shift away from this reliance on private vehicles, and I agree with the last statement made. You're sort of living and working the existing built-up environment with the and challenging, but you just have to face the problem confronted with rapid urbanization. It harms a citizen's quality of life, and so TOD has to be part of the urban planning model. There's no question about it. We are also faced with the funding constraints of being able to meet that vision. So many promising projects lack financing, and for that locking in of funding towards TOD projects really comes down to project selection. So we do a lot of work in going through pipeline, linking the planning aspect with project selection. The financing is there. Hear from financiers or give us good projects. And so a lot of the plays it's not part of a comprehensive planning process. So where the benefits are clear and there are funding issues, and PPPs, we often work through that funding mechanism, are there for the taking. It's just poorly, planned in terms of how all those pieces come together. And investors are impatient. They're looking for, projects that are ready to go, that are well prepared. So that disconnect, I think, sometimes just leads to very long lead times in developing projects. We've seen some projects can take a decade to get off the ground, often because of poor planning or financing, which is sort of stop and start. That's going to be an issue. And then investors just get tired and they'll move to the next project. Government, so governments need to, I think, leverage, and we're going to talk about green financing a bit later on, but they need to leverage those opportunities and keep the interests of investors keep them in the frame to be able to get these projects developed. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Naresh, what are your views on this subject?
Thank you, Doris, and thank you, WAPPP, for giving me opportunity to be part of this stellar panel. A lot is already communicated by the worthy experts, and I'm primarily going to share the sustainable transportation and how TOD would help. Right? To me, sustainable transport is a big enabler and not just a mechanism for commuting. It aims at provisioning universal access, better safety, and it has reduced environmental impact, improved resilience, and greater efficiency. It is vital. It is vital for us to achieve the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and Paris Climate Change Agreement. Now, we all have discussed how to achieve it. Like we do for anything else, we need to uh, map the entire process and mapping as it is applying to a particular geography or a particular country, and then interpret as to what it would take to make the linkages sustainable. It would involve measures to reduce carbon footprints, bringing higher energy efficiency, least disturbance to environment during its construction and after operations commence. Eventually, it should lead to better air quality and cause less noise pollution. Let me give you two small examples. The Tokyo Central TOD development is world famous. Many of you have been there. Tokyo Station is the central station where four Shinkansen high-speed rail lines and many commuter and subway lines connect. It is also the area which connects the city center, Tokyo Station, Japan's central business center, major financial institutions, insurance companies, ICT companies, mass media, and trading companies are located, meaning it draws a lot of commuters. In terms of value capture, various redevelopment schemes are underway and continue to happen and provide the necessary public infrastructure in and around the station. Overall, providing a seamless travel to the commuters for various modes. And I must bring out here that in Japan, they also provide the schedule of trains in seconds. That's for the punctuality. Now, my worthy colleague has already mentioned about the station in India, which is now named as Rani Kamlapati Station, which was inaugurated by the Prime Minister last year. It is one of the first development under PPP mode, and this was procured through the Swiss challenge approach. As part of that project, initially conceived, 400 A and A1 stations were to be developed. And subsequently now, the work has been allocated to the zonal railways, and all the 3,000 plus stations are to be developed by PPP or in-house resources. And that's going to be one of the largest project of its kind in the world, possibly. Friends, a thoroughly integrated approach is needed to move towards sustainable transportation. It should be able to bring multiple stakeholders on one common platform. It should be sensitive to specialties of each stakeholder, each type of transport, and their dimensions. There may be a different risk altogether for a particular player, and thus an in-depth and detailed enmeshing is need of the hour. It goes without saying that sustainable solutions will be multimodal. The commuter should be able to seamlessly shift from aircraft to air taxi, from train to metro to pods to road taxi, bus, or simply walk to the workplace. In essence, the relative advantage of different modes of transport will have to be integrated in an optimal fashion. The implementation of such solution frequently calls for the coherent deployment of instruments from different fields. These could be governance, economy and finance, science, technology, innovation, and individual and collective action. Lastly, it's very important to deploy technology for ensuring quality of service, especially in developing countries, wherein users are encouraged to provide regular feedback, and there is quality implementation of the standard operating procedures, and deviations are punished with impunity. Commuter should remain the queen or the king, as you may say. The more she adopts the public transportation, the more it would move the society towards sustainable commuting. And that should be the aim for TOD. Thank you.
Thank you, Naresh. And thank you for remembering us never to forget the project behind the PPP. Thank you to all of you for your opening statements discussing these key challenges. I will remember the win-win approach, the need of process to include sustainability, the special approach for brownfield urban project with complex legal environment, with care to the community who need to the proof of added value, and always keep the development fast and include financiers. So now I would like to turn to each of you and explore more in detail some of the topics you have been discussing. And also, if we have time, we will try to integrate questions from the audience when possible. So please, dear audience, please send your question with the Q&A chat, and we will pick up and look at them. My first question now is for Martha. So we're talking about TOD, transit-oriented development. This is an American concept coming from all European cities. Everything has changed since then. What would be your recommendation for developing countries with high demographic rate to ideally structure their transport scheme so it is sustainable?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, how to apply TOD in developing countries is something we think about a lot. Many of the successful examples that are from developed or high-income countries, we look at the classic ones in Tokyo or London or Hong Kong, and our challenge is really how to translate this experience for developing countries. So I have a few thoughts on this. They'll probably sound very basic and prosaic, but I hope they're helpful.
Go on.
The first step in TOD is creating value. And the value of an area around a station is a function of its market value, its place value, and its node value. And here I need to give some credit to my colleagues Serge Chalat and Gérald Olivier. This way of thinking about TOD comes from a report they did called Transforming the Urban Space Through Transit-Oriented Development. You can get it on the World Bank website. The market value is the inherent real estate value of the plot of land, and it considers drivers of demand like current and future population and jobs, and major drivers of supply like how much land, developable land is available, potential changes in zoning of land, and the basic vibrancy of the real estate market. The place value is around how nice is this place to live in? What kinds of amenities like schools and health care facilities does it have? Can I meet my daily needs walking or cycling? What's the quality of the urban fabric? Because we find pedestrian accessibility, small size of urban blocks, a fine mesh of connected streets, and a mixed pattern of land use makes for vibrant neighborhoods. And the nodal value is the measure of the importance of the station based on the passenger traffic volume, its interconnectedness with other transport modes, and centrality within the network. And really successful TOD requires this high quality of urban development around a station, and the responsiveness of such developments to the market needs are very fundamental to create value. And while the railway influences the node value, the zoning aspects of the market value and many of the drivers of place value are in the hands of the urban planning authorities. So, second point, only partnerships can achieve optimal results. Creating maximum value requires a broad range of expertise and assets, specific development rights, and active consultation with future users and citizens. and aligning interests in a way that each party can understand how it will win is an essential step for successful implementation. And I'd like to emphasize two aspects of these partnerships that seem to be especially difficult for railways. First is that there needs to be a strong relationship between the Land Use Planning Authority, the Urban Transport Planning Authority, and the railway. And this sounds so basic, but it's often a gap. As Mr. Sinha may recognize, in many places, the railway service is provided by a national railway who sees the urban or suburban railway service as their biggest loss maker and may treat it like a stepchild rather than the queen of commuting. On the other side, the Urban Planning Authority ignores the railway. It doesn't belong to them and they don't control it, so they leave it out of the planning altogether. And it's very important to bridge this gap. Another partnership I'd like to emphasize is with real estate development professionals. Railways, by and large, do not know how to develop real estate. It's important to bring into the mix people who do. Okay, my third point is that TOD takes a long time. I think Elon said something like 10 years. Well, in most cases, I would say it's more like 15 to 20 years between the start of planning and the end results. So don't go into this thinking it's a quick real estate flip. Nobody is going to get rich overnight. It takes patience and persistence. Fourth is that each line and station is unique, and the degree of land value to capture is greatest where the land value is high and you can bring in a new rail service. So if you're starting with brownfield, you do need to adjust your expectations accordingly. Finally, good governance mechanisms are needed to put in place to manage risks. When leveraging land value, railways face a fairly high commercial real estate risk, and managing such risks requires independent review of land values, partnership with other developers, and close management monitoring of financial obligations and contingent liabilities. So to sum up, look to create value, build your partnerships, be patient and persistent because TOD takes time. Be realistic about returns where the real estate value is modest, and structuring good governance. Thanks.
Thank you, Martha. I mean, this is fantastic. I like very much your idea of creating value, and it's a notion which is such easy to share. And I mean, the creation of heritage for full populations that will allow the acceptance of also the cost of the project. And this idea is, I mean, you decline it so well with all those various subjects. I mean, obvious guidelines in the transport experience of users effectively is not that easy to transfer to administrative issues. Real estate is a job, it's skills, and PPP users might not have that. There is no urgency. Get the time to be prepared and do things well, and governance, always governance. Thank you very much, Martha. I mean, I'm sure there will be a lot of questions for you. I'm turning now to Arkasina, and I would like to keep on going on this idea of TOD, and I would like to understand better in TOD what for you is key to sustainable transport. I mean, we're all talking about sustainable transport, but it's not an easy idea to understand when you've never done it. So I would like to know from your view, is it more service to passenger, basis of sustainable network or trains, and namely for emerging countries wanting to develop their railway network? What would be your recommendation in terms of strategy to be ESG compliant?
Doris.
Hello?
Doris, Mr. Sinha is disconnected. So you may decide.
Maybe. Okay, I mean, that's direct live. This is not Maybe I will ask Elan if you can answer my question. I've got one question for you while Mr. Sina is trying to reconnect. You mentioned financing in TOD and that we should keep financing included in the discussion very early in the project. Do you believe that in sustainable finance, green financial instruments at government level should be better promoted? Because, I mean, this seems to be very technical for financiers, and how to make it more easy to understand for all the railway community, how to accelerate the ESG transformation of railway green finance.
Yeah, thank you. I think I've got 5 minutes, so how to condense that in a way that's meaningful.
That's your challenge.
I mean, the case has been, yeah, no, it is. I'm looking at my clock to try to stick to time. You know, I mean, rail is already a front leader in terms of climate performance. The case is clear. I looked at some numbers. European railways are up to 9 times less CO2 intensive than road. You know, for freight, a number of trains already running electricity. So a lot of financing is already in the system, but you know, the changes to rolling stock infrastructure comes at a cost. All these new technologies. So there is traditional funding, and that's always an option. And we know there's a limited
envelope.
You know, sources of funding. It's going to go through taxation. That's one way. It's going to go through users paying. You know, so you know, if you want to move away from these traditional funding measures, the finance industry needs to catch up, and they need to feel reassured when they go into a particular market in areas that are considered green, and to use these instruments called green financing. So how to better promote and put in place this financing is extremely challenging, and it's very different. Even if you look at Africa, you know, different countries are different levels of maturity in their capital markets. But I would say if I want to think of a few things that governments should be doing, you know, one, it starts with policy. You have to send clear signals to the market about what your intentions are. So again, if I pick on Europe, you know, the European Commission has set clear targets. I think it was to shift 30% of goods transport away from trucks and onto rail and inland waterways by 2030, and then they increased it to 50% by 2050. So the market needs to know what signals are we getting from this government. You know, these are long-term investments. If you want capital to be patient, they have to be in the game for a long time. So that clear signal has to be there. The other challenge is is getting a common taxonomy, so these green taxonomy indicators, because there are boring things like accounting conventions, you know, treating depreciation of assets, and how to incorporate climate risk assessment in assessing projects and then providing the funding. So that has to also be looked at. You know, how sophisticated is that particular market at the national level, regional level, able to attract that funding into the capital markets? It's challenging, there's no doubt about it, but that's going to be important as well. And then climate resilience and national infrastructure plans need to be blended. Again, it's about sending the right signals to the market. And then when it comes to, you know, the funding mechanisms, you know, some countries have been quite successful in issuing, you know, green bonds. SNCF, the French National Railway, has issued green bonds. It's been very successful, so they're developing a track record. So, you know, whether it's the corporation that issues it, if they're creditworthy, whether it's at the municipal level, municipal bonds, you know, sometimes there has to be some government subsidies to sort of prop up the market and the sector to get it off into the right direction. And as been discussed earlier, there's also land value capture following TOD investment. So that's a way of leveraging and mobilizing capital as well. So governments need a multi-pronged approach. There is not one solution, and there's no one size fit all, but they've got to be able to marry the sort of the signals they send to the market at the policy level, the institutional level, to go to the point that Martha raised. These are long-term projects. You've got to be able to stay into the game to see them through. And then when you've got undeveloped capital markets, and I'm not trying to plug development institutions, even though I used to work for one, but part with developers, especially for those countries that have less developed capital markets, is going to be key. It allows you to reduce risks around forex, credit, you know, provides credit enhancements, and mitigates some of the risks at the early stage that investors will foresee, and therefore that will give them a bit more comfort to come into that market. So that credit support is going to be key. So it does at the end, and I'll end here. Start with the public authorities. The funding priorities and what they do is to be key. It'll lead the way. And the last thing I'm just going to emphasize once more, the funding is there. It is going to be about good project preparation and prioritizing the right projects. You want those first mover projects to lead the way and to be successful. If you fall flat on your face, that sends the wrong signal to the market. Thanks.
Thank you, Elan. I mean, this is a very good point also to remind to our audience that preparation of a PPP and a railway project, namely, is not only a private sector issue. I mean, we definitely need to have the public sector in and not to get rid of project when going for PPPs. And politicians must send the signal you mentioned. Thank you also for your point on taxonomy. Makes taxonomy clear and easy, so it can be declined from national level down to local level. So this is very key. So now, thank you very much, Elan. I hope that we will have a nice question from the floor on this one also. I'm turning back to Mr. Sinha, and I'm glad to have you back. I would like to hear you on the key to sustainable transport. What I was mentioning is that sustainable transport is kind of wide definition, and I would like to know if it is more service to passenger, basis of sustainable networks or trains or whatever, and also for emerging countries and people being new at developing their railway network. What would be your recommendation in terms of strategy to be ESG compliant?
Sustainable network of transport. When you talk of a sustainable network of transport, I guess you are talking about multimodal, not
Yes.
just about railways.
Yeah.
Railways have to be only a part of that sustainable thing. Ultimately, it has to be for the improvement of living conditions, for the improvement of the society, while at the same time generating sufficient revenues for the transport system to sustain itself, develop itself, be more energy efficient, be more productive. And to achieve all this, the specific thing which you asked me about how the ESG can be taken care of. Now, in developed countries, I am not sure because I don't really have experience of that, but for a developing country like India, I can only say that the environment, social and governance issues provide certain risks in the sense that from time to time, the government policy keeps changing, especially as far as environment is concerned. So at the time of project formulation, if there are certain policies of the government, which the transport managers take into account while planning, then the costs are built into their estimates. However, as the time goes along and the government changes, then the risks related to the changing policies regarding environment, ESG, they present a problem. And therefore, to take care of it, I think what government can do is to keep the risks related to ESG issues
We are unable to hear you.
I think we have issues with your connection, and we cannot hear you. Maybe you're back.
Yeah, I am back. Yes.
Yeah,
So I was explaining that the railway services were previously being provided only by the central government in India. And now the government is having a public-public cooperation with state governments. And there are very few projects in India where the private sector is involved as a partner. The only two projects which I can remember is where the end user, that is the shipping, has come forward to shipping industry to make railway lines in a PPP mode with the government to service their own ship ports. Other than that, all the railway development in India has been in the public.
The line is being yeah, we lost Arkar. I mean, this is a pity because that was very interesting to get his view on developing countries about the impact. I mean, the position of the continuity of the political decision over the lifetime of the project. And it is true to say that it's very very counterproductive to have discrepancies in the national discussions, and when governments are changing the position, namely on environment, over the lifetime of the project. I mean, it creates troubles with lenders, it creates constraints in raising financing. I mean, it does not attract many competition from contractors and operators. So this is one really key point to have this continuity in the governance of the project over the lifetime of the period. And it's also very important, as he said, to have the calculation made in advance that the project will globally generate sufficient.
I think I was again blanked out for most of the time.
Yeah, I was just rephrasing what you're just doing, and please keep on going.
Okay.
No, I don't know how much should I repeat myself, but as I said, India, the problem of ESG has been solved by the government dealing with the ESG issues and not passing them on to the private sector wherever private sector is involved in railway projects.
Thank you very much. I mean, I'm sure that this will generate questions all about the continuity of governance in this project and how to implement that. This is not an easy issue. I mean, you mentioned that it is going in developing countries, but we're seeing that coming in developed countries where, I mean, the government are maybe attracted to or try to change the decision which has been decided in the past. And I mean, this is quite interesting, and this is really key for the success of the project. I'm turning now to you, Dr. Naresh Bana, about financing and profitability of PPP railways. I mean, the railway sector profitability is quite low. It's very robust, but it's quite low. I mean, basically between 4 and 6% a year. So that's not much compared to venture capital, for instance. What makes it so attractive for investors? We've seen that it's becoming an asset class. So in your view, why do you think it's so attractive? And how do you think that we could still improve this profitability?
Yes. Thank you, Doris. I'm going to share my views as a PPP expert as well as an entrepreneur. You see, railway projects are not only big in terms of geography, but they are big in terms of investments as well. Today, a normal 100-kilometer rail project may cost anything from $500 million to $1 billion. Railways, though, give less returns, but have big impact on all the sectors of economy. In my view, the investors prefer investing in railways for not one reason of ROI, but many reasons. And primarily for its capacity to deploy large investment for long duration. Being long-term projects, there are certain components of development whose value also goes up substantially along the project, while their book value continues to reduce. The land assets, which actually stand substantially depreciated on the balance sheet of SPV. So historically also, when we see, we don't come across many rail promoting companies which have gone bankrupt. That may not be the case with aviation, where we have many of them. So there could be huge numbers making investment lucrative. In most countries, also we see the railways are run by the government, or they are under their direct control. Thus, investing into railways, though appears fraught with navigating through the bureaucracy, but also it provides them direct access to the decision makers, and they are able to somewhere safeguard their ROI or their financial health. The case in point are the railways in UK, which were saved more than once, the private parties. And with the advent of technology, my expectation is the biggest beneficiaries would be the private investors who have invested in railways. Because you see, the railway system is a very complex system. Until now, there are many gaps which are either leading to leakages or inefficiency. Now, with the coming in of IoT and more technology, these gaps are going to be filled in terms of efficiency and leakages both. And overall, it will impact the top line. So, investor certainly stands to benefit as far as railways are concerned. The current revenue stream of the railways may be drawing their primary income from passenger or freight revenues, or additionally from land development rights, hotels, shopping malls, offices which are on their land, as we have discussed in the TOD. Now we are also factoring in many other modes of revenue generation, which are based on renting out the right of the way for water pipelines, gas pipelines, optical fiber cable, underground electricity transmission, solar modules, and power generating utilities, and of course the advertisements. A lot of revenue is coming in. And I would not like to repeat, for the paucity of time, the development of Tokyo Central, which is for all to see and understand.
Thank you, Naresh, very much. And thank you.
Doris, I have just 30 seconds of recommendations.
Let's go.
Yeah. So to make it more profitable, the governments will have to develop facilitative legislative framework. 3 V's: value for people, value for future, have to be factored right here. Then procurement teams of the government will have to be technically sound with unimpeachable integrity. The design and planning should be aimed at optimum costing of the project. At this stage itself, a value for money exercise must be undertaken to ensure no overpricing of the project. Construction of project to be undertaken using modern management tools to do it in optimum time frame. And lastly, once the project opens for commercial operations, the revenue flow may or may not be as per expected or projected earnings. It is thus better to offer a hybrid format wherein a threshold limit is mutually decided, below which the revenue shortfall be supplemented by the government. Similarly, the upper band should also be defined, above which the revenue sharing should also be in favor of the government. That's it.
Thank you very much, Naresh, and thank you for all of you for your intervention. I mean, you just started answering to one of the Q&A that we've got in the chat, which is basically how providing affordability and value for money during implementation of real PPP models. I mean, this is very key, and you were right to remember that I mean, PPP in railway is are quite complex and need some tough skills. I will pick up some questions from the Q&A chat. So we've got question about financing. What is the model for financing railway PPPs? We've got how to ensure affordability and value for money of PPPs, and we've got one very also interesting question about gender-related issues in railway financing and operation. So, I mean, you see on this panel that we are equal in terms of gender, so you've got the proof that it can happen. Martha, did you want to take the question on the gender-related issue?
Well, sure. I'm not sure that there's very clear examples on this. I think it's important to think about. And, gender is particularly important in railways in two ways. One is ensuring that the services the railway provides to passengers are adapted to women as well as men and to the needs of women as well as men. And then the other one that I feel very personally is around employment of women in the rail sector, which traditionally has been a very, very male sector. I don't think there are easy answers to either one of these things, but I think we need to work on them.
Totally sharing your view. Arka, do you want to take the question about providing affordability and value for money during the implementations of the PPP models? How would you do that? What are your recommendations in terms to be sure that you can afford your railway?
Value for money has to be ensured right from the stage of planning. The selection of project, the construction methodology, the time frame over which it has to be done, the partner to be chosen, everything has to be thought of at the time of project formulation itself, and that is what will ensure value for money in a railway project.
Thank you. Thank you. Elan, I'm turning to you for financing. What is the main risk in financing railways, and what kind of structure you would elect? We know that railways quite generally needs subsidies in order to be balanced financially speaking, to be bankable. But what would be your recommendation? What are the key risks? Is it on the construction side? Does it depend on the scope?
Thank you. And I apologize, my connection's been so I don't know if you can hear me clearly.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Been cutting. Yeah. Can you hear me well? My line has been cutting. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, maybe I'll turn off my video just because the bandwidth has not been cooperating. So I hope you can hear me. Interesting you mentioned that, because there's been discussions recently on a few projects on EVs and how to introduce decarbonization of transit, and then comparing what the situation is between rail, and then looking at 2- and 3-wheelers and taxis and ride hailing. And governments, they want to do rail, they want to go electric. The cost is prohibitive. How do they bring the market to the table? And they recognize they need to fund the infrastructure. And the market, the signal tends to be, we'll fund the rolling stock. Because the risk is, especially for an investor, am I going to put in billions of dollars into a rail asset that sits in the ground? And then when things go belly up, what am I going to do? And what recourse do the lenders have? So that the trend we see, is rail structure ultimately will rest with government. And it's not just in rail, we're seeing IT systems and other structure. We'll bring the rolling stock. We'll bring the best technologies as well. And that's one of the reasons you want to leverage the private sector for PPPs, bringing the latest technology. And our lenders are comfortable funding the rolling stock. I think the challenge becomes, how do you overcome this of the heavy investments in the fixed assets on the assets? But I think that's hard to overcome. So that's the main trend I'm seeing is It's just this reluctance to invest in these hard, heavy, assets. But rolling stock, that to me is the minimum, and that risk should be more than acceptable for the lenders of investors.
And what about the real estate risk? Do you think that it has to be embedded in the PPP in the PPP scope? Martha mentioned that.
Yeah, this is dicey because who's going to take that first loss risk if things don't go well? Governments tend to be in better position because they're always there, just come and go. So are you going to get the value you expect? It also depends on whether you have an established, built-up environment or you're going completely greenfield. I love the story of going over major cities like Toronto, and you know exactly where the metro line is because if you fly over at night, all the businesses are where the transit lines are. So there's an obvious case for building up that environment around stations and capturing that value. But in areas that are not built up, who's going to take that first risk? So it's a challenge. There's no easy solution. If they believe in,
that's why you're expert.
Sorry. Yeah, exactly. Well, consultants have all the answers and advisors, of course. So yeah, they'll lead the way. Yeah. So I mean, governments tend to be willing to take that initial risk, and the private sector will follow. Will the private sector do it? They should, but will they believe in the long-term viability to take on that risk? That will depend on the policy environment, frankly.
Okay, thank you, Elan. That was very interesting. I think that we do not have any more questions, so it's time for us to conclude. I would like to thank our panelists for sharing with us their expertise and all their know-how today on this financing of railway PPP project session. This was very interesting. I would like to say to our audience that you can contact our expert, and I do encourage you to do that through the website. This is easy. Never hesitate to ask questions in PPPs. Even all of us with all the many years of experience that we have, we need also to discuss amongst ourselves. So don't be ashamed. Raise your questions and go for railway PPPs. Thank you very much to all of you. This session has been recorded, so we will make the replay available soon. You will get it from the same site, and I hope that you did enjoy the session. Thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.